Okay, so what we're going to do now is to take a look at the chemistry of life. And the big ideas in what we're going to talk about are these. First big idea is that all organisms require certain chemical elements.
Really?
And second big idea is that these elements combine in many different ways.
Like what?
I'll tell you later. To form the countless substances found in cells. So these small amount of elements, small number of elements, combine in many, many different ways to form all the things that we find in our cells.
Really? Like a lot?
No, inside our cells.
Oh.
Things like water or proteins or other chemicals. And last big idea is that some elements and some combinations of elements are really important, really vital to life as we know it. Some elements are especially important, and some combinations of elements, compounds, are especially important to life. Okay, so here are the things we're going to talk about in this lesson. First of all, atoms, elements, compounds, molecules, a little bit about mixtures, and then something we've done before. We're going to look again at organic molecules, which include these big molecules of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. And last of all, we'll look at inorganic compounds, and the most important of all, which is water. So in part 1, we'll talk about atoms, elements, compounds, and molecules. And we'll do the others in the second part. So the first thing on our list was atoms, and I have here the comment that atoms are amazing. And the first amazing thing about atoms is that despite the fact that they're so small, we can understand a great deal. We can understand a lot about atoms. So,
like what?
Well, listen and I'll tell you. Here's the first picture, which is a model of an oxygen atom. So a model of an oxygen atom. And you can see I've tried to show that there are 3 different kinds of particles in the oxygen atom.
So we have orange one, a red one, and a green one.
Okay, and the orange ones are called electrons.
I don't.
The red ones are called protons.
Cool.
And the green ones are called neutrons.
That's a weird noise.
And what you will see is, where do you find the protons and the neutrons?
Next together.
Okay, so they're together in the middle. And the electrons are
away, farther than the others.
Yes, far away from the center. So this center part we call the nucleus. So in the nucleus we find protons and neutrons, and electrons are found outside the nucleus, far away from the nucleus. So the second amazing thing about atoms is that atoms are mostly actually made up of empty space. So just before we leave this oxygen atom, can you tell me how many protons there are in this
8.
oxygen atom? 8 protons. And how many neutrons?
8.
8. And electrons, how many electrons? 8 electrons also. Now in atoms there are always the same number of protons and electrons. In this one there are also the same number of neutrons, but that is not always the case. But in an atom there will be the same number of protons and electrons. And for oxygen that number is 8.
So...
And the last thing to say before I leave this page is that Protons have a positive charge, electrons have a negative charge, and neutrons are neutral. They have no charge. So we can use this page to summarize what we already know. Protons. Where are protons found?
In somewhere.
Where are neutrons found? Where are electrons found?
There.
And charge? What's the charge in a proton? How about a neutron? How about an electron?
Electron.
And mass we didn't speak about yet, but the answer will be that protons have a mass we don't measure in grams, we measure in something called AMU, which stands for atomic mass unit.
Cool.
And proton has an atomic mass unit of 1. Neutron has the same mass as a proton, but an electron is so tiny, it is such tiny mass, that really we consider it as being basically 0. So before you go any further, could you try and fill in this table in your notebooks, and then we'll check the answers. Okay, so these are the answers here. I won't go through them point by point, but this is the answer here. And this sign here, I think, means something like is approximately equal to. So it's approximately equal to 0. So before we go on any further, before we leave atoms, I just want you to try to draw a model of a hydrogen atom and then a carbon atom. So a hydrogen, these are the smallest atoms in the universe, only 1 proton and 1 electron, usually no neutrons. A carbon's a little bit bigger, 6 protons, 6 neutrons and 6 electrons. If you could try and draw a picture of these just to check that you get the idea of atoms. So we've spoken about atoms. We'll now go on to think about elements. So in this list of things here, there are 3 elements. Can you see what they are? You can just stop the video for a little while and just see if you can identify the 3 elements. Okay, so the 3 elements that we have in this are hydrogen, carbon and oxygen. Carbon dioxide and water are not elements. They are made up of more than one element. Carbon dioxide is made up of carbon and oxygen, and water is H2O. It's made up of hydrogen and oxygen. Air is something different. Air is a mixture of different things. But you might be wondering, what exactly is an element? Well, remember we said that on the last slide that hydrogen has got 1 proton, carbon, each atom of carbon has 1 proton, 6 protons, each atom of oxygen has 8 protons, and this helps us to think what an element really is. So the meaning of an element is that an element is a substance made up of only one kind of atom. So every atom of hydrogen has only 1 proton. Every atom of carbon in the universe has 6 protons, and every atom of oxygen in the universe has 8 protons. Now there are about 90 naturally occurring elements, and there are other ones which have been made by scientists. And all of these elements are arranged in a table called the periodic table of elements, which is an important tool in science, especially in chemistry. There's a copy of the periodic table at the back of your textbook, and this is a little bit of it here, which I took a photo of, and you can see that it arranges elements in order of the number of protons in the nucleus. So carbon here is 6, nitrogen is 7, oxygen, as we know, is 8, and so on. And another thing that you might notice is that each element is given a symbol, which is either 1 or 2 letters. So carbon is C, nitrogen N, oxygen O, this one here, fluorine F, neon is Ne, and so on. So just to sum up that, elements are arranged in order of the number of protons in the nucleus, and each element has a symbol made up of one or two letters. Now if you look at a periodic table, you'll find that there are over 100 elements, but not all of those are really important elements in life. In fact, only about 6 elements make up 99% of living material, and these 6 elements are given by the symbols S, P, N, C, H, and O. And if you look back at a periodic table, you'll be able to find out what the names of these elements are. You should do that now and note down the names in your notebook. So for a human being, about 65% of the mass of a human will be oxygen, about 18 or 19% is carbon, about 10% will be hydrogen, 3% nitrogen, 1.5% is the element calcium, and that's mostly found in our bones, and then a little bit, about 1% of phosphorus, and all other elements will make up just over 1%. So only a few elements are really important in our bodies. Now if you've been thinking about all this, you may be a bit worried, you may have a bit of a problem, because what do you know about hydrogen? Hydrogen is a gas. What do you know about oxygen? Again, oxygen is a gas which is found in air, as is nitrogen. Now carbon is usually in its most common form as a black solid. So am I saying that all of these mixed together make a living thing like you or me? That doesn't sound right. But the problem with that is what you have to understand, or what we have to understand, is the difference between an element and a compound. And I'll try and explain that difference by talking about a simple compound, water. What do you know about water? One thing that I'm sure that you know is that the water is sometimes written H2O. Now what does this mean? What it means is that each unit of water is made up of 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, and they are joined together like I've tried to show here, where oxygen is in red and hydrogen is the smaller blue atoms, and they are joined together by what we call chemical bonds. So water's not a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. What it is hydrogen and oxygen joined together by chemical bonds, and we call these kind of substances compounds. So just to put that in writing, a compound is made of 2 or more different atoms joined together by chemical bonds. So one example is water, another example would be carbon dioxide, which has 1 carbon and 2 oxygen atoms joined together by chemical bonds. So this is how I could draw a picture of the carbon dioxide with 1 carbon shown in black and 2 oxygens. And these units here for water and here for carbon dioxide are called molecules. So for us, we can think of molecules as being made up of 2 or more atoms joined together by chemical bonds. So if we return to this worried looking fella here, thinking about the hydrogen and oxygen and carbon and nitrogen and so on in his body, the answer to his question the solution to his problem is that these elements are not found as elements in his body, but they're joined together as compounds. Okay, so we've reached the end of part 1. So just to check that you're following, just to check that you're keeping up, you can try these questions here and write the answers in your notebooks.